Wayne is.
Wayne and Nathan here. The heavy hitting team.
Who is?
Well, heavy anyway. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and others. Feedlots is an update on feedlot compliance. A bit of background to date, until most recently, we've actually had I suppose a two-pronged approach to feedlots. They have been, and this is this approach is not solely the way we operate with feedlots. We also do it across a whole wide range of things within council. The feedlots situation addressed firstly through on one part through our land management, and of course our land management people who Nathan looks after, they're out on the ground daily dealing with farmers and speaking to them and advising them, and also I suppose it's the in quite simple terms, it's the carrot part of compliance, where they're discussing the ways and means that farmers can best achieve positive outcomes in line with our regional rules and our plans. And the other side is the compliance, which is supposed to stick, which is my team. And the way this has been operating is, of course, we've had land management people speaking, cajoling, influencing members of the farming community, and on occasion when incidents are reported straight to us, the compliance team's actually gone out directly and spoken with feedlot operators. What's happened, as you will well be aware, that most recently there's been a fair bit of interest both inside and outside council about how feedlots are operating and either been allowed to operate or can operate in our community. And so what has actually transpired within our organisation anyway is a realisation, number one, that at the moment it's not actually working 100% for us. We are finding on one hand we are, even with the best intentions, we are finding that some operators are not actually operating within the realms of the plan and our rules. And so what happened in July, the compliance team went out with members of the land management team and visited a number of feedlots. I think it was 5 in total. And I suppose at this point I should point out that the 5 feedlots that we did visit, these were operations which we visited with the full consent of the operators, and so they were there too, wanting to I suppose to work with us to find some kind of solution. So what we actually found out was, while we as the compliance team are quite certain in our own mind that the rules are quite clear as to how feedlots should operate, what transpired is there does appear to be a little bit of, I suppose, either misunderstanding or failing to understand the way in which the feedlot rules should be applied. And so what we have done, and to coin the chairman's phrase, we've realised that now is a good time to sit back and have a cup of tea, because what's happened as of a couple of months ago, of course, there are no longer any feedlots operating because the stock, because of the time of year, have now been taken off. So we've got until the next season to actually sort out a few matters. So what we're basically saying from the compliance perspective is that, as I said, we're quite certain what the rules mean and what they should mean, and we are saying to operators that this is what we expect, and so in that time period we are going to be working with them, I suppose, to help them understand as to why this is the case. And in fact, if they want to know, is my current operation or my intended operation, is it going to be legal, then what we're doing is developing I suppose a decision support tool for them to either to make that determination, and if it means that they cannot operate within those rules, then they can speak with us, and we will help them through that process. If it means that they cannot, then they'll be required to obtain a resource consent, and at this point a resource consent is most likely to be along the same lines as what a dairy operation has now for the control of their effluent. So that essentially means collecting, in some way treating, and then discharging in a safe manner to the environment. And if they decide that they don't wish to go along that route and they want to test it, then we're telling them we'd be quite happy that it can be tested in court. So that's where we are with that. That's the immediate future with feedlots. Of course, as part of the whole the next plan setting process, no doubt this will be a visited in a lot more detail. At the same time, we've engaged, the council has engaged an expert from the South Island who was involved with the 5-star beef operation down in Canterbury, and he is helping us, I suppose, to work with both with ourselves and with the community to come up with some plans going forward as to the best manner in the future of dealing with feedlots and the disposal of effluent and things like that. Have you got anything to add to that, Nathan?
No, he's due to report back to us next month. He's looking at the various systems that we have. We're visiting 4 farms that cover the range of systems that currently exist. He's looking at what practices are being employed, what issues are there, what avenues are there for improving practice as it stands. Yeah, I look forward to his recommendations.
Thank you, guys. Questions? Tom?
Just two, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Chairperson. How many are there? The 5 that you visited are representative of 15, 50? What's the scale of this?
There's 12 that we've been working with on a regular basis. There may be a few more, and that was a question that was raised a little bit earlier on. There might be a need to just have a bit of a look around, because there are a few that we probably are unaware of. 12 that we are engaged with on a reasonably regular basis.
And sorry, Councillor, but in the past too, there's been a couple that have popped up that we've visited and told them, well, they're not appropriate or in the wrong place, and they've closed down. So, but a lot of these cases, of course, if they're not near the road, you don't get to see them unless we would go up in the air and have a look.
And in item 7 here, where it says a majority visited were non-compliant with existing rules, what sort of existing rules are you referring? What are they not complying with at the moment?
Now, I haven't got the rule with me, but essentially what the rule says, it defines a feed lot or a feed pad, and essentially it's there's some parameters around that, like anything. I think the cattle shouldn't, if the cattle are there for more than 30 days, was it 15 days and 15 consecutive days, it becomes a feed pad. There are provisions about back fencing, so while you've got all the cattle together, obviously over a large period, once they move on to a new part of the pasture, then they should have like a fence behind them, so they can't go back and continue pugging and fouling behind, things like that. So a lot of them were, a lot of the, when I say the non-compliance are things like that. Too close to a roadway. There's something like you've got to be like 20 metres from from the road and from the boundary. Just things like
that. Thanks, Wayne. Just looking at number 11 on the report. If operators wish to continue that practice, what do you mean by that practice?
Oh, the practice, I'm talking about feedlots. So that's essentially, I suppose in layman's terms, a whole lot of cattle on a piece of land, as you drive past, you can see exactly what they are. There's the pugging and effluent all over the place.
So we can introduce a requirement for them to get a resource consent to run them like that.
Oh, most certainly. And then what that would mean, though, while I think I've mentioned it before, resource consent is permission to do something. There'll be quite stringent rules around those, just like the same way, say with a dairy operation, dairy farmers aren't allowed to just dispose their effluent straight from the cow shed straight onto the paddock.
Okay, so currently to run a feedlot you do not need a resource consent, is that correct?
Yes, you do, if you are not operating in accordance with the rule and the rules as I explain them. There might be 1 or 2 operators do have resource consent at the moment to run feedlots, but to tell the truth, they're not as prescriptive as what I've outlined in 11, in item 11 there. And those consents actually are the requirements there. They have got monitoring and stuff to actually determine what kind of effect the discharges on groundwater and land, etc., like that. So the more kind of finding out what's happening kind of consents, rather than thou shalt do this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wright, I just wonder whether you could help me in your role as the manager resource use. Are you involved in pulling together the project performance updates that are produced, for example, under the regulation group activities?
Oh, yes.
That you're involved in?
Yeah, under the compliance.
Sure.
Under the compliance.
Yes, I'm a little confused. Perhaps you could help me. I'm noting that in this report, the narrative for that we've got green lights everywhere and nothing to see here in terms of compliance, and yet in your report I'm seeing, you're noting non-compliance. Are we talking about the same periods of your report versus these two respective reports covering the same time period?
I think the report that you're referring to, I think you got in front of you, is looking forward. Is that the report?
No, the narrative project performance update.
Oh.
So it's performance of the period up to the 31st of October. So when I read that compliance monitoring and I see green lights and progress all on track, and I read your other report on feedlots saying non-compliant, how do I interpret that?
Perhaps I could help you, Councillor. The performance measures that you would have read in the annual plan progress report are the performance indicators that the compliance team per se is required to meet. So if that says that they're on track, it means that they're meeting their KPIs, as opposed to they're not in that report reporting on the level of compliance by consent holders. So they are two different things that are being referred to.
And maybe I could clarify there too, shortly, it may even be the next meeting, we're providing a quarterly, I suppose, compliance update, and that's the type of thing we'll be reporting on to councillors then.
So can I just indulge me a little, Mr. Chair? I'm seeing 95% of monitoring consents achieve an overall grading of full compliance. Are you saying, in this case, the feedlot scenario is in the 5%? As opposed to, is that how I interpret the report?
I think what you're finding, what you're reporting there about the 95% compliance is consented activity.
Yeah. So, Councillor, I think the issue here. So, no, can I explain? I think this will help, and it'll back up Wayne. There's so the compliance team monitors consents through whatever process they monitor. It might be proportional consents on a regular cycle, etc., etc., etc. Right? Those are consents. The feedlots per se are not consented activities.
Well,
so no, hang on. But this is relevant to the way you're interpreting the information. So, if those feedlots through a process, so the feedlot issue has emerged, and a combination of the regional council staff, compliance and land management have now effectively undertaken a piece of work to review that activity and ask the question: does it fit in the plan framework? That's where they're at. That's what they're doing, and they're saying on the basis of the evidence that they've seen, that at least some of those activities don't.
That's right.
But the point is that to come back to the reporting framework, those activities that don't comply either cease or they have to get a consent, and then they would fall into the bracket that we're talking about.
That's right, and that's actually one of our KPIs, that process that Mr. Newman outlined. Yeah, we identify things like that.
I hear what you're saying. I'm intrigued by it, but because your level of service says compliance monitoring strategy, and it's not contained or confined specifically to resource consent, it's a compliance regime over across the board. Putting that aside, while you're here, can you tell me, in terms of your green light reporting, and we are talking specifically about a resource consent matter now, does that include the Hastings or the Havelock North resource consents of the Hastings District Council when you tell me everything's on track in this report?
It includes all resource consents. Now you're talking about 95%.
So you're saying that the troubling issues in Havelock North relate to 5% of non-compliance, are in the category you've described.
I'm actually not quite clear what you're getting at, except what I should say is that the environment we work in, there's not full compliance, and if you're trying to put like a figure on it and you're trying to catch me out.
No, I'm not trying to catch you out or anything.
On percentages. 7,000 or 8,000.
So what you, in terms of interpreting the report which you were part of completing, the situation with Havelock is that that's within your reporting regime, that no, they're in the 5%, if you like, and therefore you're compliant with your statement of your level of service. Is that how I interpret that?
Oh, yes, sure.
And would it be prudent, however, to report significant non-compliance in the case of Havelock North?
As I said before, that level of detail will be in our to come report, but that's certainly, from what I can gather, that level of minutiae is not required in this reporting.
Perhaps we could.
So could I just do a follow-up? So if there are 7,000 or 8,000 consents that we're monitoring and 5% are non-compliant, that's 50 per 1,000. So we're talking like 400 consents that are non-compliant on the basis of 5%. Is a hell of a lot.
No, we're saying that's the target. The 95% is the target. And a number of those consents are not actually physically monitored. And we monitor them now in two different ways. We have physical monitoring, and we also have this telemetred monitoring, which essentially is information just coming through, and it comes through and it's ticked off. So that's all part of that those figures.
I'm just saying we're off subject here a little bit. No, that's right. But if we could take, I think you make a very good point. Second, Paul. At the moment, we're dealing with this feedlots paper. Are there any questions directly related to the feedlots paper? Because before we go to, okay, questions related to that, and we'll come back to that, Neil. But we'll come back to that. Maybe bring that up at the Environmental Services.
I'll make sure I'm here if you need me.
Yeah. Okay. You first. Oh, Paul first, and then.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair.
You can stick to on this paper.
Yep, absolutely. The way I read this particular paper is that you've been down to see 5 feedlots, and you've gone through an education program for them, and basically said if you don't buck up, then next season we will be coming after you one way or another.
Not quite that simple. We visited 5, but what I'm indicating to everybody here is that it's actually Pan Hawke's Bay. It's not just these 5. These are just 5 that we went and checked to see what was happening.
So a follow-up question to that would be if that's the case, then are you actively going out and speaking to all the other feedlot operators to give them that same message?
Oh yes, that's all part of the plan, and what's planned there is actually having meetings with groups, and using our friends in land management to help achieve that.
The intent is to get a letter to all the feedlot operators that we know of in the Tukituki by the end of the year, for Christmas. Just informing them of where we're at in the process from here, and then we're gathering them all together in the new year, all the feedlot operators that we know, to talk about the implications of what we're doing.
We've got a couple of operators who are involved quite closely in that process, as well as federated farmers too. So I'm not doing it in isolation. Yeah.
Just to further follow up to that, you mentioned that you're talking about obviously actively pursuing feedlot operators in the Tukituki catchment. Are you not doing them throughout the whole region?
We'll do them everywhere. These rules will apply to everywhere. The feedlot rules as they stand apply across all catchments.
As land management, we've primarily been working with people in Tukituki.
Just want to make a small observation. I see in point 10, the council will be taking a zero tolerance approach. Next season implies that we've taken a non-zero tolerance approach to the previous seasons, which I don't like. The second thing about this is zero tolerance is some sort of cliche used by law enforcement teams in the US to try and make out some political point, and I'm against that. So I think we should say what we mean. And I took this council will be rigorously monitoring and enforcing the rules of the RRMP. That's what you're saying to me, isn't it?
Certainly.
Well, if that's what you're saying to me, say it. And the second thing I've got to notice of, that the recommendation, I'd be happy to move an amendment to it, which would go that the council receives and notes the update and feedlot compliance report, and notes that the council compliance team are to give notice of their determination to rigorously monitor and enforce the rules of the RRMP.
Beautiful.
So I think it's good that we are stating it what it is. We're just not going to note it. We are stating and noting they're going to go and do something. It's a very clear message. We endorse it.
I'll second that.
A question, the review that you are taking with your consultant, will that be made public?
I'm not sure, Councillor, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I think at this point in time, it was for our information to start with, in terms of guiding our response and the recommendations that we might make through consents to modifications that might be made to systems to become compliant. I'm not sure where we're going to take that.
Although, of course, it is available on, it would be available on a Lagorma request or something along those lines. It wouldn't be kept secret as such.
There's nothing confidential anticipated in there.
Okay, we've had enough discussion on this, I think, in questions. So we have Councillor Barker's just added to put some weight in behind. I actually quite like zero tolerance, but I die on it. But so the recommendation has been changed that they will. How does it read?
I've got to write this down because I actually quite like what Mr. Barker says. I'm going to use that in the future.
I should know Wayne's history. He has his history of being a policeman.
So have you written that in? Okay.
In New Zealand or in China?
So we're adding to the recommendation. Order, please. We're adding to the recommendation. What are we adding to? Just read it out. Because it's just.
That council receives and notes the update on a feedlot compliance report and notes that the compliance team give notice of its determination to rigorously enforce the rules of the Regional Resource Management Plan regulating operation of feedlots. I just added that on.
We've got monitor and enforce. That's what I wrote in there. So we monitor and enforce them.
Okay.
And do we have a mover and a seconder? Do we?
Yes.
We had a mover.
Seconder.
Mover, seconder. Is there any more comment on it? Because I have one. So we were clearly caught out here. Now I understand it's difficult for us to be everywhere, but the market got in front of us, and the cockies got in front of us here, driving the market forces. And we can't allow that to happen, because what did happen in our community is that we had national politicians coming down, flying around there. They flew drones, they had photos in the paper, and we didn't look too good in all of that. So, and then we find out that, well, they weren't compliant. So we're gonna take a little bit of a bashing about that as well. So somehow we've got to resource it, and this was driven by market forces. This was driven by cheap grain prices and high beef prices, and we need to have a bit of an understanding of these things, and that people will do things and they will stretch the rules, and they stretch the rules, and we looked like idiots when they did. So I'm just putting that to point. When you said, I want to be proactive, Wayne, I do want you to fly over there. Get a little plane, get young Bostock to take you up and fly you around and find out who's doing these things, because they will do it for the extra dollar. It's, I think Councillor Hewitt said at the time, greed.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did?
No,
Oh, okay, well, not a point of order. I'll just retract that. I will say greed drove this, and it wasn't good for our community, and it wasn't good for this council. So that's just my comment on it. So we'll take, if you want to speak to you. Thank you. Well, all those in favour of the recommendation, which has been refreshed and renewed? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.